All right. Hello, everybody. Tara Bachland here again with my colleague Alberto Carbo.
Hey,
And,
everyone.
and glad you jumped in. All right, now we're live on Instagram as well. So I'll do it one more time. Hello, everybody. Tara Bachland here once again with my colleague Alberto Carbo.
Hey, everyone.
And so glad to be here again to help you learn about herbs, herbalism, so many fun details that are going on. So today we're going to talk about what is an herbalist and what to expect when you go to the herbalist for the first time. We've all been there and reminiscing back, even as Alberto and I were preparing these notes, it was like, wow, yeah, it was kind of awkward. It's kind of like, anyways. So if you haven't been yet, hopefully we'll help you. These will help you to find your way. So if you haven't been to the herbalist yet and you're considering going, first we should probably cover a little bit what is an herbalist, because even I was actually apprenticing with an herbalist and I didn't even know. I was like, what do I call you if someone's asking, what are you doing on these afternoons? She's like, you can call me an herbalist. I used to be a nurse. And so there you go. So you might be wondering, first of all, what is an herbalist? So we'll cover that. And Alberto, are you hearing that little kind of chirp again?
No, not right now.
Would you turn down your input and let's see if that I think what's happening is I think it's coming through your system. Let's test it though. Thank you. And then also, so first of all, how do you find an herbalist? That can be kind of tricky because, they don't always, they're not like a chiropractor that has their sign out right out in front usually. And then second of all, how do you choose an herbalist once you got your list? Third, how do you schedule with them? What to maybe expect in that process? And then what to expect maybe at that first appointment and subsequent appointments, what you may feel after that appointment, like actually physically, not just emotionally, and then also what to expect on any follow up after that. So, hopefully, this will help you. Maybe you've been wondering whether to go an herbalist, but those first few steps are daunting. So, we'll help you along the way. Butcher, what was your first experiences with an herbalist, going to an herbalist?
Yeah, so that is the interesting. Um, my story, I think, is fitting and kind of different from yours in that you were apprenticing with an herbalist and you didn't even know what an herbalist was. And I think my story is similar along those lines, and it speaks to herbalism almost quote unquote died in North America, especially. Like it was it became very scarce and there were very few herbalists for quite a while. And so, yeah, most people today don't know what an herbalist is, and have never heard of one. And when they do, they think, like, well, what is that? They're very curious. So my first experience with an herbalist was actually in the jungles of Peru. And it was an incredible experience. I learned a lot about herbal medicine at a time where I was not yet interested in pursuing a career as an herbalist, and more therefore personal health reasons. Um, and upon returning to Canada, I didn't even think twice about it, because I that was in from my perspective at that time. Um, that was an experience I had in the jungles of Peru, and not something that I could find in Canada. And so, about a few years later, I did find an herbalist in my area, because I picked up a book they had written at a local bookstore. And after reading the book, and first of all, realizing, like, wow, there are people who do this in North America still. I didn't think there were, but there are. And then finding out more about her and realizing, oh, she's in my area. And that was Abra Arneson, by the way, whom I ended up apprenticing with. So yeah, to speak to your point that herbalism is very much, I wouldn't even say misunderstood. I would say, you know, kind of unknown for most people. So yeah, if you're wondering what an herbalist is, you might learn something today.
Well, you might even actually be around someone like I was interested in health and wellness, and there's this neat lady in town who has an herb shop, but they weren't like herbs. It wasn't like loose herbs in bulk. It was in, nice little packages and what more so like bottles and tinctures and mostly capsules. She had homeopathics and also sold natural food items. And so I thought, oh, neat. This lady has kind of a mindset that I like, like incorporating all of it, right? But she really focused on the herbs. And so there may be others of you out there who are already using herbs, even simply a chamomile tea or a number of common things like that, a peppermint tea to settle the stomach, but you're already technically practicing herbalism. And yeah, it's kind of like the herb hunt, we go hunting for herbs. It's almost like you have to go hunting for an herbalist when you want to find a teacher or find an herbalist to consult with. And so we're going to give you that roadmap, some clues on how you can find an herbalist near you. And so that's really, first step would be, is there an herb shop or a natural food store near you? A co-op is a great example. Usually the person in the supplement section, they usually know quite a bit, especially if it's a co-op style grocery store, not just a chain store that has a supplement section. They're usually very knowledgeable, and or they will know someone in the area and can refer you. Another person you could get a referral from would be a massage therapist. They typically are tied in with this community. When you're at a farmer's market, ask around if they're involved in herbs. They're usually in the similar community. They'll probably know someone. And similarly, speaking of co-ops and farmers markets, there are a number of CSA co-op style farms these days where you might pick up, your organic eggs or your pasture raised eggs and meat products, and they're usually involved in this community too. And what are some other ideas that you have, Alberto?
Yeah, I mean, in today's day and age, the internet is a great resource. So even just looking for, an herbalist in your area on Google could yield some results. Now, not all herbalists have websites, and a lot of them do work with referrals mostly. So you may not find everyone like that. But as Tara was mentioning, yeah, talking to anyone in the alternative health community, a massage therapist, an osteopath, a naturopath, even an acupuncturist. Acupuncturists are herbalists, but they specialize in, and maybe that's something worth pointing out as well. Acupuncturists are herbalists, and so are Ayurvedic practitioners, but they specialize in the Eastern traditions of traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, whereas myself, for example, or Matthew Wood or Phyllis Light, they're more Western herbalists. So the Western herbalism, and that's the part that surprised me, because of course, at the time of the jungle in Peru, I had heard of Ayurveda, I'd heard of traditional Chinese medicine, but I'd never heard of Western herbalism. So Western herbalism is the practice and the philosophy of herbalism that has lived on through the Western culture, essentially, to sum it up in a nutshell. Of course, it's more complicated than that. But if you don't find someone on the internet, then asking your local alternative or natural-based practitioners, I would say, is your best bet. And and asking around at like a tea or even a tea store or herb shop, or anywhere like a holistic or natural based food store. And even if you don't see like a flyer or anything like that, ask someone that works there. An herbalist may have left a card. And ask specifically for an herbalist. Like, just even knowing that word herbalist is maybe the first step. But the other way too is you can check with the herbalist associations that are local to you. So in the United States, you have the American Herbalist Guild, and In Ontario, where I live, for example, we have the Ontario Herbalist Guild. There's the Ontario Herbalist Association. In British Columbia, there's the British Columbia Herbal Association, and there may be a local herbal association closer to you. And anyone who is a registered herbalist would be listed on those websites, respective to the association that they are associated with. But of course, there are many herbalists, incredibly competent and experienced, knowledgeable herbalists who are not registered with an herbal association. So you won't find them on those websites, but it is definitely worth checking those registries.
Definitely. And another great resource, just going back to the co-op atmosphere, a lot of times there's local magazines. And so you may, whether, herbalists don't necessarily put ads out very often, but they might have an article in a magazine. And again, you might find these other local communities that would be tied in with herbalists and herbalism. And speaking of community, at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, you would also find an online community, and we've had plenty of people ask there, do you know of an herbalist near me? Because there's people from all over the country and actually literally all over the world, and they may be having a hard time finding someone, but usually someone in the community can say, yeah, I know someone near you, or they might take an online appointment. It is nice to see a local herbalist. It does, it's kind of that folksy down home feel, that so many of us are tired of going to a doctor that only spends 15 minutes with you. It's kind of nice to be in person with a herbalist, but sometimes, especially for the right herbalist, it's really nice to, it's pretty amazing that what you can get done through an online consultation. So at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, we do have a community where you're welcome also to say, hey, is anyone near me, an herbalist? And also, as we have graduating classes of the year 1, 2, and 3, or family, community, and clinical herbal curricula, we will be posting graduates as well, so you can find them there. We forgot to go over, we just assumed everybody knows what an herbalist is. And I went through my story again, but that's again, assuming that everybody knows what an herbalist is. And in my mind, people often go to an herbalist when they have not been able to find solutions in the tradition, I'll say traditional, as in what is most common in our society, allopathic, go to the doctor, get a prescription, that kind, when they're just tired of it and that has not suited them, is often the case. And some people grow up with herbalism as a part of their family, but they're just not usually the people who are asking, well, what is an herbalist? And so an herbalist is someone who uses more holistic and specifically herbal approaches to help peel back the layers and help to get to the root cause of an issue. Now, herbalists do not diagnose, they do not treat, and they do not prescribe. So it's very different from, a doctor's visit. You're typically going to get a lot more time with the herbalist, and we'll get into this in these steps. But that's more of an overview. So while you maybe an herb might be suggested, it's not necessarily in the same way as a prescription drug, and they are not prescribing as well. And the aim is to get to the root of the issue. Very apropos for being herbalists and herbalism, right? Getting to the root. And so the effects may be very different from taking a prescription drug. And you being different, you also may be very, very pleasantly surprised. We'll be obviously be getting into details, but how would you describe an herbalist, Alberto?
Yeah, that's a great description. But yeah, I would say an herbalist is someone who uses natural, mostly plants, from their surrounding area. And usually herbalists prepare their own medicinal herbal preparations. So they're usually gathering and foraging for the herbs in their local area, of course, in natural and clean environments. and someone who is well versed in the in the understanding of the body. And that's also important to point out that, while they're well versed in the anatomy and physiology of the body, they may not use the same language that you would expect, for example, that a doctor would use. So herbalists tend to use more nature-based languages and describe um, uh, issues or things they see in the body through a more nature-based language, which we can get into in a bit as well. But for those of, most people, I would say today, in today's day and age, likely are more familiar with the Eastern practices of like Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, as they have become quite popular over the last few decades. And so if it helps to compare, an herbalist, a Western herbalist, is relatively very comparable to a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, minus the needles, and an Ayurvedic practitioner, with the difference being that their training has followed the lineage of Western medicine, which of course came through Egypt, then into Greece, then into Europe, and then into the Americas, and has then kind of blended with the natural medicines that were already here, of course, from the Native American communities, and as well as all of the African American communities that brought their own medicine with them, and also learned to use the plants and the roots and the herbs that were already here. And so Western herbalism is that lineage of the understanding of and philosophy of using herbs, um, and and it is a holistic approach to well-being.
And something that's worthy of pointing out is compared to traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, traditional Western medicine is going to, like you inferred, is going to use different herbs. And some people believe that it's good to use or utilize the plants, the products that are in your community, in your local area, that your body will adapt to them better. And that's not always true necessarily. I mean, I've seen and heard of people who respond very well to traditional Chinese medicine, for example. But it's also an advantage because as you're learning about, or if someone is recommending a traditional Western herbalism herb, it's likely going to be in your area, if at least in your country, likely, if we're talking about North America, if not practically in your backyard. And so that's interesting to note as well. There are going to be names that you may recognize, even if just, a lot of people have heard of nettles, for example, or dandelion, right?
Yeah.
And so they're names that you can pronounce. It's something that's very familiar. So that's kind of comforting to some people as well, but not always necessary. You might find a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner that you just really, really jive with. So the next step is getting to know. I would recommend getting, several referrals, get several names, look up their website. If they have a website, maybe they're on social media. That's kind of a nice way to get to know them as well. Or give them a call. A lot of them, you'll probably have to give them a call. And, they're not going to do a consultation over the phone, but you might have a few questions in mind, that, maybe saying, I still work with a doctor, but I want to work with an herbalist who will work with me with my doctor, might be a way to help discern who is the right person to work with. Or maybe you have certain strong beliefs that would be helpful for both you and that herbalist to know right off the bat. Are there any things that come to your mind? Like, you're a practicing herbalist, what is helpful for you to know when someone's coming in? Because that chemistry is really important.
Yeah, I would say if you cannot, or if you don't know anyone who referred you to that herbalist, and you maybe found their card at a herbal shop, or through Google, you found their website, and you want to get a feel for them, give them a call, and many herbalists will definitely talk to you. And yeah, as Tara said, they likely won't do a consultation over the phone, but some things that you could ask would be along the lines of questions to help understand if that is someone that you would feel comfortable with. Because when it comes to health, just like with a doctor, you want to feel comfortable with that person or that practitioner, and you want to have trust in them. It's a very vulnerable place to be when you're not feeling well, and also to bring your concerns, your health concerns, to someone who at that time is a total stranger. It is you're putting yourself in a vulnerable place, so it is important to feel comfortable, and it is important to of course have a feeling of trust, although you don't know them yet. Have a sensation that you can build trust with them. And so even just having a 15-minute conversation with the herbalist, and asking questions about them, like, how did you practice? What were your studies like to be able to practice as an herbalist? Who did you study with, or how long have you been in practice for? Will give you really good ideas of the training that person has undergone to then open up a practice. It'll give you ideas regarding how long they've been in practice, and and then while you're asking those questions about their practice and herbalism more specifically, you can get a feel for their personality and how you jive with them, because that's really important as well. And then you can also ask them another question you could ask is, what is herbalism? And they although we've just described it here, they will have their own explanation and their own understanding of herbalism, and it'll be more specific to how they practice. So that will give you a really good idea of what types of herbal remedies they would recommend, if they're from local plants, if they are from exotic plants, or if they're making their own medicine, or if they're then recommending you to someone else that makes the herbal medicine. And that way it gives you kind of like a picture, an idea of who this person is, a bit of their personality, and then also they've been practicing for X amount of years, or they studied for X amount of years, so it gives you a bit of confidence as to their expertise. And in getting them to talk about herbal medicine, you get to understand the lens, or the perspective with which they're approaching health.
Mm-hmm. Very good tips. I would also give them a heads up. I'm not asking for a consultation over the phone or mini consultation, but this is my XY issue. And how comfortable, or how do you feel in working with someone who's dealing with this? Because like people in the allopathic realm, there are people who specialize in the herbal realm. And so there might be someone who specialized maybe in children's health, or female reproductive health, or even as specific as fertility. And so you can even get someone who's very specialized, and that can be extremely helpful. Not to say, I mean, there are a lot of herbalists who practice generally as well and are very, very helpful. But in certain cases, it can be very helpful to find someone who specializes as well. Oh, and then along those lines, it's perfectly appropriate, and actually, I think, good to ask how much they charge and what is their structure for pay. That just sets it clear from the beginning, right? And the cost is really going to vary. It's going to vary depending on where you live, the herbalist expertise, and those are probably the two main criteria. Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, no, great idea. Good task up front. How much it would cost, just like with any service, right? Even getting your car serviced, you want to ask how much it's going to cost ahead of time. And something important to point out is that typically, and this may not be for all herbalists, but typically herbalists, there's a fee for the consultation, and the initial consultation is more expensive than a follow-up. And then consultations are generally separate from the herbal remedies. The herbal remedies that are recommended are usually sold, after consultation. They're not included in the consultation, and that's because they, of course, they have their own cost to production, but also the cost for those medicines really depends on the herb, and of course the type of product that is, whether it's a tea or a tincture or a salve or a cream. It really depends. So make sure you ask, but generally speaking, the herbal remedies are sold separately.
And that can vary. Maybe if you came in with a whole list of issues, you might just ask for a range. If they're like, well, it depends. I like to ask, what's the range? Because it might be a single remedy at $15, or if you have also a physical ailment and you're like, yes, I would like something to spray on that. It could, there could be multiple remedies up to 100 and something. Again, it's going to depend on your area. It's going to depend on the type of product. But it is good to have a ballpark idea, and it's always up to you. You might even say, what would be good to start with, sort of thing. It's not set in stone, but it is helpful for the herbalist to know, what you're coming in, what you're expecting, and do know also, again, the herbalist does not prescribe, but if you're looking for a certain result, it's more likely to happen if you follow their recommendations. So while you always have choice, I highly recommend following the recommendation. Always follow your own gut, your instinct, your intuition. Don't negate that. But just a little bit of, I don't know, just some thoughts and insight there as well.
Yeah, and to add to that, if you call the herbalist or have a conversation with the herbalist ahead of time and you get a good feeling about them, about their personality, their expertise, and you book a consultation with them, and after the consultation, they may recommend herbal remedies right away, or they may reach out to you within a couple of days with their herbal recommendations. But if for some reason you don't feel comfortable or satisfied with what they're recommending, they are recommendations, so you don't have to follow through with them if you don't feel comfortable, of course. But especially if you do not feel comfortable, reach out to them and ask, and voice your concerns about them, because herbalists usually are very communicable and will explain to you why they recommended those remedies, and will answer any questions that you have about them.
Yeah, that's a good thing to ask too. And when you're first communicating with them, is based on follow-up. If I'm feeling kind of funny, and usually they'll have this on a form that kind of leads to my next point too, is when you schedule with them, which you schedule like you would with most appointments, right? Most often you're going to have a form to fill in. And oftentimes you'll also get some instructions. I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but you'll get some instructions. And if they don't have instructions, ask them, what if I'm feeling a little funny afterwards? It's not quite right. Do I need to schedule another appointment? Can I just text you? Can I call you? Then again, that ahead of time, because especially on your first time, you're probably going to feel some things that are not, and not necessarily bad, but it's a different experience is what I'm getting at. So do expect those forms. You book appointment like you do a typical appointment. No big surprises there. And the first appointment is usually longer, and that's what most people are looking for, right? They're looking for someone to listen to them. And that's really an herbalist, a lot of times, is their specialty. They're really listening. You might get asked some different kind of questions. You're wondering, well, where is that going? But they're following a thread. So do know that you, and again, that's important to work with someone that you feel comfortable with, because not that they're going to ask maybe things that are super personal or private, and maybe, and they'll usually the herbalists I met are super polite. They might say, hey, this might feel a little uncomfortable, but what about this? If you don't feel comfortable asking, that's okay. But they do what I think a lot of people are looking for in their doctors, which is, hey, listen to me, look, help me unpack my story and peel back these layers rather than just hearing symptoms. They will listen to your symptoms as well, but they're looking at getting underneath them.
Yeah,
What are
absolutely.
what are some questions that since you brought up language also, that maybe people have maybe been surprised that you ask, or you know
Yeah,
you,
yeah, and
you
I mean,
tell
I mean, when starting a consultation, or I mean, even questions before a consultation, probably the most frequent questions I get are, like, what is herbalism?
them.
That would be like pre-consultation, or even right at the get-go, someone maybe booked a consultation. They are, they're open to something new, so they've gone ahead and booked, but they still don't fully understand, that they get, okay, they work with herbs, and they're obviously open to that, but they don't fully understand, what is herbalism, like what is it that you do. So that's probably the most popular question um that I get. And in terms of questions about, like, were you referring to questions in, like, during a consultation, or?
Well, I can give a few examples that just came to
Yeah.
my mind.
Yeah, go for it.
So they might ask you what color your poop is, and
Yep.
what's
Yeah.
the consistency, and so that might be a good one to be prepared, because a lot of people don't look. And that's really the folk herbalism. That's the folk aspect, right? I mean, I talked to my grandma. She's 82 years old, and she raised one of my cousins, and so he's obviously much younger than her, and he grew up thinking that everybody talked about their poop, and a surprise to his generation and classmates that wasn't common. But he grew up with my grandma, and in that era it was really common. Or for example, I was talking with my best friend the other day, and she had a sinus infection, and I was like, okay, is there mucus? She's like, yes. I'm like, what color is it? And it seems really gross to talk about these things, but those are like key indicators. It's like, you're the sleuth, you're the detective. Yeah, you got to look at some grimy stuff every once in a while, or hear about it, right? Alberto, your turn to come up with what are
Yeah.
some.
Well, what I would say is, herbalists, and I think we've mentioned this, but herbalists generally tend to approach health from a holistic perspective.
Right.
So when you mention in a consultation a symptom or a condition, I'm experiencing this, and you list, several symptoms, or I'm experiencing that, and you list several symptoms. The herbalist is going to have a lot of questions to follow up. They're going to ask more detailed questions about the specific symptoms. If you say I get headaches, they're like, um, what type of headaches? What part of your head is hurting? What time of day? Is it at night? Are you waking up from the headaches? Are you having trouble falling asleep from the headaches? So, like, follow up questions to really get a detailed understanding of the symptoms that you're experiencing, and so those can be specific to the body part in which that symptom is experienced. For example, headaches, asking more questions about the nature of those headaches, but they may also be questions that uh, that zoom out a little bit and look at the body. So if you're getting headaches, they might ask, well, what is your digestion like? Because there's an understanding that there's a big connection between the gut and the digestive system and the head, and sometimes headaches can result from complications with, like, the gallbladder and the liver and such. And so an herbalist really is, we could list questions off for quite a while, but it's so specific and dependent on um on the person and on what they are experiencing, and that's kind of the point of holistic medicine, that you're not a symptom. You are a person
Mhm.
experiencing a symptom. And so when you go to see an herbalist, they will hear you. They will take the time to hear what you're bringing, the concerns, the health concerns that you're bringing. And it may take you, you know, 15 minutes to talk about your health concern. It may take you half an hour. However long it takes you, the herbalist is going to listen. And then they're going to follow up with specific and detailed questions about all the different parts of those health concerns to essentially extrapolate and get very specific details about your experience, and to hopefully better understand what you are experiencing, um, so that they can get a holistic picture of you as a person experiencing these symptoms. And so their herbal recommendations will be based um, on on that entire assessment. So it's not just take this herb because you're experiencing this, but rather, you're experiencing this. Let's tease that out. Let's understand why you're experiencing that. And then we can narrow down what herbs could potentially be best suited for you at that time.
Excellent. Yeah, so true. They must also help you admit that it might be a person at the root of your headache. Half teasing.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's part of holistic medicine, right? That is, emotions, like our emotions. Like I've personally never had a doctor ask me about my emotions,
Mhm.
um, but it is a very important factor. And while it doesn't always factor in, many people are experiencing purely physical things due to physical issues due to physical factors. But many times our emotions play a big role in our well-being, and we don't even realize it. So yeah, herbalists may ask you about your feelings as well.
Yep, be prepared, and it's okay, and there are remedies for that too. It's pretty amazing. Very, very
Yeah.
amazing. So herbalists have quite a different toolkit than, and I'm comparing to doctors because that's what people are used to. And I'm not speaking disparagingly about doctors. They definitely have their place. So grateful that they are there as well. It's just very different. And sometimes we're looking for solutions in a different arena. And so their tool and their toolkit is different. So their assessment is going to be very different than a doctor. They're not going to pull out a stethoscope, or they're typically not going to palpate your body. And that's really not typical, just by the way. If you have like a pain, they might palpate a little bit or something, but that is not very typical. So the of course, questions. They'll be asking a bunch of questions. They'll be observing you. And, if they maybe went to an herbalist, it kind of would look like they were zoning out, so don't get too weirded out, because they're just really trying to take in the whole picture, right? What are some of your favorite tools to use, Alberto?
Yeah. So I, my primary assessment tool is definitely the conversation. So talking, listening to the person, hearing them out, and then asking, as I was saying earlier, very detailed questions to tease out any symptoms and experiences. And after that, the main assessment tools that I use, are facial assessment. So, and this would happen throughout the consultation. The herbalist will be, and maybe that's what you were referring to, Tara, where, the herbalist may be like looking at you from a different angle, because they're assessing, there are many things on our face that can be signs of unwellness, or signs um, of issues. And especially if those signs align with the conversation and the experience that you have verbally communicated to the herbalist, there may be a correlation there. The second assessment tool that I use, and I usually do it after. Some herbalists may start with this, but I usually do it after the conversation. or verbal assessment, if you want to call it that. And that would be a tongue assessment. So looking at the tongue. And so you will be asked, and of course, if you're not comfortable with it, you don't have to do it, but the tongue is part of the digestive system. It is a mucous membrane. And so the tongue can often really give us a very, what would you say, a very like in the moment picture of what is going on in the digestive system. So looking at the tongue, and again, if what is showing up on the tongue or what we are seeing on the tongue is correlating with the experience that the person is having and communicating verbally, that is also a strong indication that there is something, that their experience and that what you are gathering from their verbal, the dialogue can also be seen in the physical assessment in the tongue. And then the third assessment is taking the pulse. And so if you've ever been to a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, you may have already have experience with getting your pulse taken. It's quite different. So it's not just the one finger and counting to counting, the heart rate. It's used, three fingers are used, and on both wrists. And without getting into it, the three different placements on both wrists correspond to different organs in the body. And so, and then the fourth assessment tool would be iridology or iridology. There's two ways to say it, but iridology, looking at the iris of the eye. The iris is also a map of the body. And if most people likely have heard of reflexology at this point, maybe not everyone, but reflexology is a modality that has become quite more popular over the last few decades. And so reflexology is, looking at the feet, and the feet are a representation of the body as a whole. And so the iris is also, and so you can look at the iris and pick up on certain things that really stand out in the iris. And so then you have three different assessment tools, or four with the facial assessment, that you're using to corroborate with the verbal experience, or the verbal, what the person is communicating to verbally from what they are conscious and experiencing, right? And because of the detailed questions, a lot of times I will get clients who, after the consultation of the conversation, they will say to me, I'd never thought of that. But like, they even start putting two and two together because of the types of questions you're asking them, so they realize, or they start to connect, like, oh, this symptom is correlated with this experience, or this other symptom that I'm experiencing. And so it's kind of, that gives you a really nice holistic picture of what the person is living through at that moment. Because of course, 2 weeks down the road, that can change, and that's part of it, and that's where follow-ups come in.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely so amazing, and it's just, they're fascinating topics. How is it that you can see in my tongue what's going on, or my eye? But how did practitioners get to the bottom of things back in the day? And actually, there are things that you can see that even modern diagnostics can't quite get to. It's a very different approach, which is why so many people come to herbalism after they're just fed up with doctors. And again, doctors and herbalists have their own place, and really, if you're using multiple modalities, you're usually able to have a good, holistic, wholesome health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those modalities that you spoke of, a number of herbalists also will use that same modalities, particularly the pulse assessment and the tongue, when they'll test the remedies. Then they'll, not all herbalists, but don't be surprised if this happens. That's kind of, we're just giving you a heads up. They might put a drop of an herb tincture on your on your wrist or something, and then feel your pulse again, or observe your face, and you'll actually be amazed. You won't see it necessarily, but you might feel something, and so communicating that to them is very subtle, but it is actually quite amazing. All these modalities, by the way, are something you would learn at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism as part of the curriculum and as part of a real wholesome, in-depth curriculum. So if that's something that interests you, you can dabble as well. We have courses that you can take individually and add to your current practice, or dive head first, feet, everything all in, and go all in as well. So just a little heads up there. How do you test for remedies?
Yeah, I do use the drop method on the wrist.
Mhm.
Sometimes I like to ask people their sensitivity level, because everyone has a different. Some people are very sensitive to um, substances, and people may say, I don't know, I've never thought about that. And so you could ask them like, well, if you're taking, let's say, medication, are you very sensitive or not? Or if you're taking um, you know um, or even like alcohol, how sensitive are you to alcohol? And so with those kinds of questions, you can maybe understand like, okay, someone who is very sensitive to any substance is likely going to respond to a much smaller dose. And so when in those cases, I may not even use the drops on the wrist. I may just even give them a small bottle of that remedy to hold in their hand. And that may sound really out there for some people, understandably, but everything carries an energetic frequency. And so even just holding a remedy in your hand can, it's by no means am I saying it will take away your symptoms or your health concerns, but it can give indication to an herbalist of whether proceeding to take that remedy internally could be beneficial.
Hmm. Yep. You just may be very well surprised. And so, as far as this is where I see quite a bit of variance. Not all herbalists sell products or make their own products. And so some do, and some may. Some may, if they have the shop, of course, they have a shop and may sell them. And some actually refer, and it also depends on what their supply is, right? What their apothecary consists of. So that can vary quite a bit. And also the types of products they recommend. And so if you're a person, for example, that tea is like not your thing, or capsules are really difficult, that might be a good question to ask in the beginning, is what type of formulation do you typically recommend for someone? So in that case, a tincture, someone who's very tincture based may be very helpful to partner with. And then, of course, is afterwards. And this is where it can vary quite a bit. If you're used to going to the doctor and getting a prescription, or maybe just not getting an answer, that happens also. That's one experience. My experiences with herbalists, I'll just share from mine, and then please do share yours as well. The 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 let's say reaction, well, that's not quite the word that I want to use. Maybe the result can vary quite a bit depending on the original condition. And again, an herbalist's objective is to help peel back the layers and get to the root of the issue. So it's not necessarily that your root issue, or problem will be resolved on the first go. It might be a process that happens over time. But what is good to know is that the aim is to get to the root issue, and a lot of times you are going to experience some relief. There So I've experienced all of the above. I've experienced like immediate relief, and I was like, "Whoa, that is a relief." And a lot of times that's when it's like an acute condition that is not years worth of stuff built up. I've also experienced where I took the herb, and I spent the rest of the afternoon and evening and the rest of the night sleeping. And that's often a good sign, where from what I understand, is that your nervous system is is finally getting a break. It's going, oh, I finally have some help here. I can take a rest. And I've found that that's been some of the most restorative sleep, and the following results have been really good as well. So that's one thing I'd give you a heads up is if you do find yourself like you're like, it knocked me out. I'm never going to take that again. That may just be an initial reaction, but also talk to your herbalist. Talk to them before you leave, what might be some things to expect, and also ask what are good ways of communicating with them if you do have reactions. I've also had very strong reactions, and the latter have more to do like if the underlying issue is more emotional based, and the first example where I've just like gone to sleep and like that was just heavenly sleep. Okay, that helps to relieve, and it's amazing if even if it's an emotional issue related to uh, a relationship, it can actually help you see where you might need to change things. It's pretty amazing. On the other hand, I've had instances where it is emotionally based as well, and it's just kind of like there needed to be sometimes there's pairings of herbs that can be very helpful. And this is where it's really good to go with an experienced herbalist. They know the combinations to help make it an easeful process rather than a dramatic one, let's say. So I think the big thing is communication. And you may have a variety of reactions, and just make sure you're in communication with herbalists. It is also, if you're dealing with maybe deep seated um, toxins, for example, they may come to the surface in your skin. You might experience a rash. Now, an herbalist, they can't control everything. But again, the main thing is communication, but it's not always a bad thing. I guess that's what I want to emphasize out of all of this is it, even though it might seem like, I'm getting a rash, is not necessarily a bad thing. That's the way, for example, your body gets rid of toxins is, I'm going to say it again, the word is through your poop, and whatever comes out your body, that's how your body gets rid of toxins, and including your sweat and through your skin. So, Alberto, will you help smooth that out? I feel like I left people like, oh my God, I'm going to have this big reaction from an herbalist.
No, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I would say that yes, communication is definitely the most important thing. So after an herbalist recommends certain remedies, they will likely inform you of what to expect. But if they don't, or even if they do, but you want further details, ask. And they will gladly tell you more details or explain it to you in a different way so that you have a better idea of what to expect. Of course, within that realm of what to expect, an herbalist will have a good idea. However, each person is an individual, and that's part of the holistic approach, that each person as an individual is unique. So you could potentially experience a reaction which the herbalist that you're working with has not yet seen. And again, it comes back to communication. If you were to have a reaction like that, what would help an herbalist determine what to think of the reaction and how to proceed with further herbs, or maybe pausing the herbs. What they would likely have questions for you regarding your reaction, specific questions to understand the type of reaction and experience that you're having. But as Tara was saying, it does vary. Even for a person, it does vary depending on the health concern, on the time of the year, on that specific time. So every time can be different. And personally, I have experienced immediate relief from herbs. Immediate relief with no adverse reactions. And when I say adverse, herbs are generally very safe. So there's no adverse means maybe uncomfortable reactions. That's probably a better word. So I've experienced immediate relief with no uncomfortable reactions. I've experienced relief that maybe took a few days to a couple weeks, while taking the remedies. And I have experienced as well, uncomfortable reactions that are not necessarily concerning, but that maybe give me pause. And I'm talking on a personal level as well. So maybe give me pause and make me think about uh, if I should maybe stop the remedy. But upon continuing, the uncomfortable reactions go away and relief then follows. So because that can happen too. And I think something that we're not used to thinking about in modern Western culture is that we're very used to the idea that a medicine could take away your problems really quickly, kind of like the magic pill. I call it the magic pill syndrome. And it's not, health doesn't, health and healing does not really work like that. I often say that the longer that you have been experiencing a symptom or a condition or a health concern, then the longer it will likely take to resolve that health concern, right? If you've been experiencing something for 10 years, and it's likely that health concerns started out small, and because maybe it was unnoticed and it didn't get addressed, it slowly grew and got bigger, and invaded on your well-being over time until it became something that you couldn't ignore any longer. So something like that will take longer to address than I'm experiencing a cold, and I take some herbs. Like, you can get instant relief from something like that, of course. So that's important to keep in mind, because you know part of holistic medicine is reassessing our expectations of well-being and of healing, and understanding that there is a path. And so that brings us to what you were talking about earlier, Tara, of healing or addressing health concerns in layers. And so an herbalist will hopefully explain this to you, but you can ask as well, especially if it's a more complicated or an issue that has been around for a longer time. The herbalist will likely say, okay, first we will address this because X, Y, or Z. They will explain to you why that issue or those symptoms are being addressed first, or why the herbal remedies they're recommending are first, so that they can address maybe the top layer, and then they will likely offer a plan. So after we address this issue, we can then address what follows after that, and so on, until we get a holistic health relief, and more of healing on a deeper level. And it's important to communicate, and if you don't understand, just ask for clarification. But things can take time, so patience and communication is definitely key.
So well put. So true. I think you saved it. Nice job. And that leads to the final point, is a follow-up. And I've seen both ends of the spectrum on this. Usually there's two ends of the spectrum. Either the herbalist is like, let's schedule for 2 weeks from now, which is very proactive. They want to follow up with you. They want to see how things are going. And then there are other herbalists. And I find that a lot of these are usually the people who've been in practice a long time. And they're just like, I have a busy schedule. You'll come back if you come back. I usually find they're on the one end of the spectrum or the other. How about it? So schedule with me. Let's book another appointment, or good luck. See ya. Let me know how it goes. How about you?
Yeah, no, I've seen both.
Yeah.
And I think, as especially if we're talking like what I would recommend to someone as let's say as a client, or as someone who's going to see an herbalist, is the same thing I would say to them if they were going to see a doctor. When it comes to your health, you need to learn to advocate for yourself. And so if you after the consultation, and you get the recommended herbs, and you're feeling like, no, I really want to see the herbalist in person again, or virtually if you have a virtual appointment, I really want to see them again in 3 weeks, and I don't just want to email them or call them about what I'm experiencing with the herbal remedies. I want to be there or virtually see them, ask the questions that I have, and have their undivided attention. Then go ahead and book a follow up, because you will feel more comfortable when that herbalist can have that set time to dedicate to you. And so that would be the same for if you're going to see a doctor. We're so used to being told what to do with our health that we don't realize that our health really is in our hands, and that's part of the holistic perspective as well. Like, and herbalists try to educate people on this, that your health is in your hands ultimately. Nobody else can really be responsible for your health. So in being responsible for your own health is asking questions, communicating, but yeah, booking a follow-up if you really feel that you want one. And as well as, you know, just if you don't feel like, or maybe you don't know, like if you want to follow up or if you should or not, then, you could always write an email or call them and tell them what you're experiencing, and ask them if a follow-up would be good. Um, but yeah, generally speaking, I mean, I can't say it enough. Just your health is your own, and so when you advocate for yourself, you will, even if you get, let's say, an herbalist who is very experienced, is very busy, and so they may not be contacting you um, to see, hey, do you want to follow up? Because they have many clients and many people coming to see them, and they have limited time, so they may not be contacting you. But if you reach out to them and say, hey, I saw you 2 weeks ago, I'm ready for a follow-up, then they will likely book you for a follow-up, right? So it's asking questions. Yeah. Back to asking questions, and advocating for yourself, and clarification on anything you don't understand.
Great emphasis on advocating for yourself and your own health. Absolutely. We're so used to, being told what to do about our health, but it really is, ultimately up to us. And by ultimately, I mean, you're faced with the benefits and the consequences. So get out there and take care of your own body, your own self. Let us know in the comments if there's any other lingering questions that we didn't address, and we'd be happy to address those, because I hope this was pretty extensive. But if there's anything else that we missed, it's been a few years since it's been our first visits to the herbalist, so we might have missed something. Also, please make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications. We do often have just impromptu going live, and so you can join us live and post your questions real time. And I just forgot there was something else.
Well, the next podcast episode will be on if you are interested or even just curious about pursuing herbalism as a career, and even if not as a career, but to really educate yourself on herbalism for your personal or your community-based needs. Then the next episode we will be talking about what an herbalist, like maybe the not so known aspects of being an herbalist, right? Because many of us who fall in love with herbs and who maybe say, oh, I want to be a clinical herbalist, we don't fully understand what the day-to-day or the clinical herbalist is doing, or the full scope of what having a clinical practice is. And so we'll be talking about that in the next episode.
Exactly. So turn on your notifications so you'll be notified when we come on air again. And oh, I remember what I was going to say. Please recommend this to a friend who may be considering going to an herbalist, is considering, let's say, more holistic approaches to health. It may be very helpful to them. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Good to virtually see everybody. And until next time, take care, everybody.
Until
Bye.
next time, take care.